Hi, it's time for a January TBR. Hello, I am Colleen, and if you are new here, I talk about books and writing, and today I'm going to talk about all the books I might read in January. Also, I got new glasses. So this isn't going to be a very strict TBR. In my last video, I talked a lot about how I was sort of not enjoying reading as much because I was sticking really fast to my TBRs, trying to read as many books as possible in a month. And one of my goals for reading in 2023 is to enjoy reading more, which might be best achieved by reading less. So this is going to be a really long list of more books than I could possibly read in January, even if I was trying to jam them all in. But of the books I'm excited for and will most likely read in the first couple months of this year. The first book that I might read in January is Migrations by Charlotte McConaghy. And this is a literary fiction. Charlotte McConaghy wrote Once There Were Wolves, which I think was the best book I read in 2021. It was definitely the best new release I read in 2021. In this book, we're following Franny, who abruptly sort of leaves her life with nothing but her research gear and goes to Greenland. And she wants to follow the Arctic terns on what might be their last migration. As the story goes on, we're going to get some glimpses into Franny's past, which are sounding very traumatic from the blurb, and I can't wait to read this book. Once There Were Wolves had so many content warnings, like so many, so I'm expecting this to have a ton too, and when I do my wrap up, I will let you know what they are, but regardless, I'm so excited to read this book. The next book is one I'm actually already reading, but I don't think I'm going to finish it in time because I'm filming this on December 30th. And while I'm really enjoying the book, I have a lot going on the next 2 days with my family. So I think that this is going to be a book I finish on like January 1st or 2nd. But it is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read Daisy Jones and the Six a couple of months ago, and I really enjoyed it. So people tell me that between Daisy Jones and the Six and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, that those are her two best. And so far, I'm really liking it. I'm not that far in. I'm on page 82. And right now, we are pretty much tracking her life through the men she's married. And I'm on husband number 2. And it's got definitely like really big old Hollywood vibes, which is funny because that's never something I really like consider myself to be into. Like, following old movie stars throughout their lives. But I read Siren Queen this year also by Niveau, which is a fantasy, but it's about old Hollywood, and I loved it. So maybe this is just some untapped historical setting that I actually really enjoy. Either way, I think you're going to get this in my January wrap up, but maybe I'll surprise you and you'll get it on my December. Next, I have a big fat book, which I did talk about a lot in my last video, and it's Babble Babel. I never know which is the right way to say it. But it's fantasy. And I looked up the subtitle when I was prepping for this video, and it was really cool. So I'm going to read it to you. It's An Arcane History of the Oxford Translators' Revolution, which that makes the book sound even cooler. So it's set in the 1820s in like a fantasy version of Oxford. And we follow Robin, who's an orphan taken into this to this school in which you learn how to be a translator. In this world, translation holds a lot of power and magic, especially when you're translating from a language that's not your first language into another language that's not your first language. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. One of my very good friends loved it, and she is a linguist and really enjoyed it. So I can't wait to read it. It's very fat, and I'm really hoping that I start and complete this in January. So maybe this will be the only book on my January wrap-up. The next fantasy I have on my list is Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan, and it's book 1 of the Legends of the First Empire. I have had such a high fantasy bee in my bonnet lately. I think partially because I'm really anxious for season 2 of Wheel of Time. I've never read the Wheel of Time books, but I really like the series. I just feel like at this point in my life, I can't get into a series that has like 15 books and they're all like 700 pages long. Maybe. We'll see. Maybe when I retire. But this has kind of the same vibes. If I'm correct, we'll see. But like from the blurb, it does. So in this, there's a race of creatures and they're called the Faerey. F-H-R-E-Y. Frey. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. but they appear immortal to humans because their lives are so long. And the book kicks off with a human sort of accidentally killing one of them. And then we go from there. And I think I'm really going to like it. I can't wait. I definitely want to read this one towards the beginning of the month. It's not that long. It's like in the 400s. So yeah. And then I hope I love it so much that I read the entire series this year. Okay, let's move on to romance. I have The Duke's Stolen Bride by Sophie Jordan, which is book 5 in the Rogue Files. I actually have read books 1, 2, 3, and 7 of the Rogue Files. So I don't really feel like... 7 was the first one I read because I didn't realize it was the last book in the series. So when I grabbed this, I didn't realize this was book 5. I thought it was book 4, but it kind of doesn't matter because I've already read book 7. So I'm looking forward to it. I really like Sophie Jordan. She's definitely like a comfort read for me. And this one is about Marion, who decides she's going to become like the most sought after mistress in London, England, Regency times, which, get it, girl. Way to set down goals. But she needs someone to teach her how to be the most sought after mistress. So she finds Nathaniel, who's a duke, and he is depraved. So this is definitely going to be like a reformed rake, I assume. And she is paying him to give her lessons in how to be a great mistress. So I can't wait to read it because that's a really fun trope for me in like this Regency time period. I really like that. I know I'm going to inhale this in like 2 days because it's Sophie Jordan and I love everything she writes. Next, I have One Duke Down by Anna Bennett. Here's a picture of the cover. I have an arc. It's coming out on January 24th. This is the story of Poppy, who is a fisherman's daughter, and one day she catches a man in her net, and he turns out to be a duke, but he's sort of on the run because people are trying to kill him, and he has to hide out in her village for a little while until it's safe and figure out what's going on. I picked this arc mainly because I love this cover so much. I feel like they did a great job. First of all, they're smiling. They're almost never smiling in historical clinch covers. And second of all, that like orangey red on her dress is just a phenomenal color that I feel like isn't used enough. So I'm very excited to read that one. Next on my Kindle, I have Dark and Stormy by M.M. Collins. Here is the cover, and full disclosure, this book is written by one of my friends, so I'm very excited to read it. This is a paranormal romance, and I did get to read the outline when she was working on it. Like, I baited her outline, but not her finished book. So I know the loose story, but I don't know exactly where she took every single scene, so I'm very excited to get into it. So it begins with Jess, who is getting married in a couple days. She's like totally thrown into the whole wedding, everything. And she walks home to her husband in a very precarious position with another woman who she doesn't know on her kitchen table or counter. I can't remember. And yeah, she calls everything off, obviously, and then decides to go on their honeymoon to the Caribbean by herself. She doesn't know that while she's on this honeymoon trip alone, she is going to meet her fated mate, and he just happens to be a mountain lion shifter. I'm very excited to read this, especially in January, because Caribbean setting is exactly what I need since I will be nowhere near a beach for, 6 months. My last romance is The Song of Lorelei by Desiree Nicolai. This is the conclusion to Called from the Deep, which was the first. This is a duology romance, and Called to the Deep was one of my favorite romances I read in 2022, so I cannot wait to read the rest. I don't want to give you too many spoilers about the plot for Song of Lorelei because I don't want to spoil Called to the Deep, but just so you know, this is the world we're in. There is Lorelei, and she figures out that she is actually a mermaid, and she can like shapeshift into a mermaid. There is Killian, who is a fishing boat captain, and they are in love trying to figure out how their relationship's going to work. The mermaids in this world eat people, and Killian has an ex who is just super nosy. So this has a lot of like eco horror woven through it and has really good coastal Maine vibes. And definitely I like this because I like monster romance a lot, but I really like this one because the monster is the lady, not the man. So next, I just ordered my Book of the Month picks yesterday. So obviously they're not here yet. That would be magic. But I wanted to let you know what I picked. I don't know if I'm going to read any of these this month or if I'll save them, but I'll probably get to one at least, but I did get 3. The first one I picked as my book of the month is What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall. This is a thriller, and it is about a group of girls who, when they were much younger, it's like 22 years ago, one of them was attacked, and the girl who was attacked plus her group of friends put the attacker in jail. 22 years later, it's coming out in their friend group that they lied. They lied about what happened, and one of them wants to come clean and the other ones don't. I really like thrillers that have multiple timelines. You get like the dual timeline, the past and the present. I've been really enjoying the last few like that I've read, so I'm looking forward to this one. I think it'll be good. Next, I did finally buy Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, which is a fantasy. I've had that on my you can make like a TBR list of all like past books you missed before you joined Book of the Month. And I've had it on there for so long. And finally, I was like, I have all these credits. I should just buy it. So I did. I am hoping I'm going to read that in January and February because it looks from the cover like it has major winter vibes. It's a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. I love Rumpelstiltskin because when I was a kid, my mom used to read us the Paul Zelinsky Rumpelstiltskin, which here's the cover. It won the Caldecott, the illustrations. I got my children's librarian hat on for a minute. The illustrations are phenomenal. If you have a child in your life who likes fairy tales, definitely pick this one up. But my mom used to read it to us as a bedtime story, and she can do like the creepiest Rumpelstiltskin voice. So because of that, I've always really liked that fairy tale. So I think I'm really going to like this retelling. I've also never read a Naomi Novik, but I've heard great things about her. So this seemed like a good one to start with. And lastly, I got A Wilderness of the Stars by Shea Earnshaw. And this is a YA fantasy, which I don't read. You all know I don't read. But here's the thing. Shea Earnshaw wrote, I'm having such a hard time remembering the title. And I can picture the cover. Hold on. A History of Wild Places. Shea Earnshaw wrote A History of Wild Places, and I read that last December, and I loved that book. So this book, Wilderness of the Stars, came out last month, I think, as an add-on, and when I saw it, I was like, I'm going to buy it. Also, the cover is absolutely gorgeous, but then when I saw it was a YA fantasy, I was like, I'm not going to buy it. But then again, I looked at it this month, and I was reading the description, and I read the sample pages, and I was like, I think I'm going to love this book. And I do partially think I've been having a really hard time in general reading books that are not romance on my Kindle. And the only YA fantasies I tried to read in the last 2 years were ARCs I got, and they were on my Kindle. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get this hardcover, and I bet I'm going to love it. And we'll see. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll read it and be like, that was a bad idea. I'm not into YA fantasy anymore. But the fact that it's an author who I know I like, and that it's a subject matter I know I'm gonna like. It's definitely got like Chosen One vibes. It's about a girl named Vega, and she lives in like a valley, which she's not allowed to leave because it's unsafe. Her mom is sick, and she sees some sort of omen in the sky, and she's the last astronomer. So it definitely has those Chosen One vibes, but I have to be honest, I'm not super personally oversaturated with the Chosen One because I have taken such a long break from YA fantasy. I mean, the last time I was reading YA fantasy regularly, I was reading what the heck are those books called? I've got to remember. Like Shiver by Maggie Stiefvater. Was one of the last ones I read before I stopped. That one, Fallen, that weird one with the green cover, Matched. So it's been a really long time since I've been reading YA fantasy regularly, so I don't feel like it's going to feel like redundant to me to read a Chosen One book. There's also the slightest chance I will listen to Two Gentlemen of Verona by Shakespeare this month. I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm going to do it in February. But I talked in my last video about my specific reading goals. And I do want to read all of Shakespeare's plays in my life. So every year I have to read at least a couple. And the Shakespeare Sessions, which is a podcast on Spotify, does some, not all, of Shakespeare's plays on audio. And I last year listened to A Winter's Tale and Julius Caesar, and they're both fantastic. So I went through their podcast last night to see what other plays they had that I hadn't already read. And they had Two Gentlemen of Verona, and they had Coriolanus. And that sounded perfect to me. I want to read 2 or 3 this year. So those both sound good. Two Gentlemen of Verona, I think I want to read first. I'm not going to lie also, it's a full hour shorter than Coriolanus, which when you're like consuming Shakespeare, which I can't like drive while I'm listening to Shakespeare or like do anything really but fold laundry. So, making it an hour shorter makes a big deal. But we'll see. I have a feeling I'm probably going to do that in February, but maybe I'll surprise myself. I don't know. Maybe the laundry will just get out of control and I'll need to listen to some Shakespeare while I'm folding it. So those are all my maybe reads. I'm not going to read all of them. I'm hopefully going to read half of them. We'll see. I'm guessing my January wrap-up's probably going to have 5 or 6 books on it. I have a lot of writing work to do and a lot of exciting writing news that'll be coming out this month, which I will make videos about, but I don't want to announce at the end of a January wrap up. So stay tuned to whenever those videos come out in the next month. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for sticking around. And please drop me a snowflake emoji in the comments because I hope you're all going to have the coziest reading month this January. We're having really, really weird weather today. We, of course, I live in the United States, so the week before and during Christmas, we had, record-breaking lows of wind chills of -40. And then yesterday we had a high of 53. So we literally swung over 90 degrees in a week in terms of temperature, but today we're having more of a normal 35 degrees, which is what it's usually like around here. So I hope wherever you are, you're cozy and you're in the middle of a good book. You're about to start reading a good book, or you're about to start writing a great book. I'll see you soon.